He never keeps one past a month.
He gets bored. She's just the next one.
No woman keeps the alpha king.
That laugh. That was the moment. Not the dress, not the strategy, not the careful positioning of 7 women who had spent all evening making themselves impossible to ignore. A laugh, and it came from the one woman in the hall who was not trying to earn it. Don't believe it yet. No woman keeps the alpha king's attention. They said it like a law of nature, like cold, like dark, like the kind of truth that arrives whether or not you invited it. For 3 years, Lena had watched it proven true, night after night, woman after woman, until the proving of it became as predictable as the first frost and twice as exhausting to witness. She had stopped finding it interesting around the 4th time she watched a perfectly beautiful, perfectly strategic woman walk away from a short conversation carrying that particular look, the one that said, "I thought I was different." She was not trying to be different. She was trying to finish her food before it got cold. The only honest person in the room. The gathering was everything it always was. Torchlit, suffocating, the kind of hall that charged admission in dignity and rarely gave change. Corner table, full plate, a goblet of wine rationed carefully because she intended to leave early, on her own feet, with her pride intact. She was wearing a dress she liked, not because anyone would notice, because she liked it. There is a difference between those two things. She had spent a long time learning it. Around her, the performance was already at full volume. Reyna had positioned herself exactly where his path would take him, close enough to intercept, far enough to look accidental. She had been rehearsing that position since morning. Lena could tell. There was a particular way a woman stood when she had practiced standing. Dara was laughing at something that was not funny. Bright, effortless, absolutely deliberate, the kind of laugh calibrated to travel across a stone hall without appearing to try. 3 other women had formed an orbit near the great hearth, a slow gravitational pull disguised as conversation. Every one of them angled, without appearing to angle, toward the same point in the room. Lena looked back at her plate. The venison was actually quite good. She did not look when he entered. She felt him first. Cold air moving against warm torchlight. The hall's noise dropping, not gradually, not politely, but all at once. The way every flame in a hall bends the same direction when a heavy door opens somewhere you cannot see. Her skin registered it before her mind caught up. She kept her eyes on her goblet. She heard silk shifting, boots repositioning, the subtle transformation of a crowd that had been performing casually and was now performing formally, the adjustment made in under 3 seconds, practiced and seamless, and revealing everything about the kind of room this was. She heard his footsteps, measured, unhurried, the steps of a man who had never once been in a room where he was not the center of it, and had long ago stopped noticing. She did not look. Then she heard them slow. Pause. Stop. She looked up. He was already sitting across from her. No greeting, no explanation offered or apparently considered necessary. He sat with the easy absolute confidence of a man who had never once been told he could not, with the particular certainty of someone who had never needed permission for anything and did not intend to begin tonight. 12 feet away, Reyna had not moved. She was the particular stillness of someone who has just watched an entire evening collapse. Lena looked at him for 1 second, then at her plate. Then, because the breadbasket was right there and she had not been planning to finish it, and she had been raised with manners, she pushed it across the table toward him. "You can have that. I am done with it." He stared at her. She picked up her fork. The Alpha King laughed, a real one, not performed, not offered for effect, startled out of him, from somewhere he had stopped expecting to be caught off guard, the kind of laugh that arrives before the person it belongs to has decided to permit it. The sound moved through the stone hall like a tremor moves through stone. Rhina looked away. Two women near the hearth exchanged a glance that held an entire conversation inside it. The orbit near the fire quietly disbanded. In the moment, Lena simply said, "The rosemary butter is good, actually. Do not waste it." He looked at her the way people look at something that does not fit any known system. "You are not going to ask me why I sat here." It was not a question. "I assumed you would tell me if it mattered," she said. Something moved behind his eyes, quick, unguarded, immediately controlled. "Lena," she said before he could ask, "I know who you are. I am choosing not to make it a thing." 3 seconds. He reached for the bread. They talked for 2 hours. She did not flutter. She did not perform. She argued with him once about which forest trails were safe after the first frost, and she was right and said so without softening it into a question, without the apologetic look women learn to apply to correct statements so men do not feel the edges. He had no script for any of it. She could see him reaching for one and finding nothing, watching him recalibrate in real time, this man who controlled every room he entered, suddenly in a conversation that followed no pattern he had learned. He kept waiting for the angle, for the ask, for the moment she revealed what she actually wanted from him. It never came. She simply talked to him, the way you talk to someone genuinely interesting, whose title means very little to you at a corner table with cooling venison and a fire dying low. By the 11th bell, every woman in the hall had stopped pretending not to watch. By midnight, they were the last two talking. When he finally stood, he paused, long enough to look at her the way you look at something you are not ready to walk away from but have not yet found the words to ask for. "Same gathering next week." Not a question, a statement. Lena picked up her goblet, slow sip, let the silence sit between them. "I will be here." She told herself it meant nothing on the walk back to her chambers, 3 times. By the third, she almost believed it, and then she remembered the way he had looked when she pushed the bread across, like something ordinary had undone 7 years of deliberate nothing in him, like he had forgotten what it felt like when someone offered without asking first. She gripped her candle a little tighter. "Do not," she told herself. A sealed parchment waited outside her chamber door. No official seal, no signature, her name in unfamiliar ink. She opened it. 4 words. The rosemary butter was good. She stood in her doorway for a long time. She did not reply. She did not sleep well. She did not put the parchment down. Their first night had been ordinary and extraordinary at once. A corner table, bread pushed across without ceremony. 2 hours that went nowhere and arrived somewhere neither of them had planned. But here is what Lena did not know. While she walked back to her chambers holding an unsigned parchment, across the hold, in a corridor she had never walked, a woman in deep green was watching a door close, and smiling, and beginning to move. She told herself she was not looking for him, the entire walk over, through the outer courtyard, through the eastern entrance, through the first goblet she accepted mostly to have something to do with her hands. She was attending because her presence had been requested. If her eyes moved across the hall once, just once, when she arrived, that was spatial awareness. Completely reasonable. He was not there. Good. Fine. Perfect. She found a seat near the window and made genuine, determined, focused conversation with the woman beside her about something she could not recall 8 minutes later. The hall shifted before she saw him, not gradually, all at once. The ambient noise dropped the way a torch drops into water, immediate, total, leaving something bigger in its place. Lena kept her eyes on her goblet. She was not going to be one of those women who tracked him the moment he walked into a room. She had standards. She had self-respect. She had... 3 women said his name at the same moment, from 3 different points in the hall, each voice landing on a slightly different note of carefully managed urgency. She looked up. He was already moving, not toward them. Raina stepped into his path. Elegant, subtle, the kind of redirect that worked on everyone. He moved around her without slowing, without looking. Another woman called his name, louder, a laugh attached to soften the desperation inside it. He did not turn. He stopped at her table. You did not send word back. She kept her face neutral. It cost her more than she intended. I was not certain it required a response. It did. He sat down. He had not looked back at any of them, not once. He did not appear to have noticed them at all, which was, she would think about later, somehow worse than if he had noticed and simply not cared. 2 hours and 14 minutes. She knew because she checked once, surprised by how far the candles had burned. They talked about things with nothing to do with pack law or border politics, the way certain stone corridors felt like the walls were memorizing your footsteps, whether silence was a skill or something you were born already carrying, a disagreement about Eastern trail routes that got surprisingly heated and ended without resolution because neither of them would concede, and both of them seemed genuinely energized by that fact. He did not mention the pack. She did not perform. The most honest conversation she'd had in 3 years. It terrified her in ways she did not yet have words for. When he stood, he looked at her the way he kept looking, like she was a problem he found interesting rather than inconvenient, and said, "Next week." "Perhaps," she said, because she needed to give herself something. The corner of his mouth moved, not a smile designed to be seen, something earlier, something real. He turned, and the hall parted for him, and Lena took a slow breath and told herself she was fine, completely fine, a rational adult woman who understood. The woman beside her put a hand on her arm. Her face was careful. He looked back, she said quietly, when he reached the arch. A pause. I have been coming to these gatherings for 6 years. Her voice dropped lower. I have never seen him look back. The goblet in Lena's hand went cold, and near the entrance arch, unnoticed, unhurried, a woman in deep green stood very still, watching Lena's face, with the patient expression of someone who had just decided something and was in no hurry to act on it. Lena did not see her. She should have. The note arrived before the morning meal. Not a formal summons, she knew those. Official seal, the language of obligation, the courtesy that left no room for choice inside it. This was different. The handwriting deliberate, slightly too controlled, the way writing looks when someone is thinking carefully about how it will land. Private dining chamber, 3rd bell after midday. Come if you wish. Come if you wish. She read it 3 times. The most powerful alpha in 4 packs, and he had written, "Come if you wish," as if she had a choice, as if he was making himself small enough to offer her one. She stood in the center of her chamber for a long time. Then she began to get dressed. She had armored herself in careful pleasantness. What she found instead was a small room, 1 fire, 2 places set, and on the table, beside the bread, beside the wine, She stopped in the doorway. A small dish of rosemary butter. She had mentioned it once, offhand, 3 weeks ago, a passing sentence about the gathering food that she had not thought he was attending to. He had remembered. Not a grand gesture, not something engineered to impress, just a small dish of something she had mentioned once on a table set for 2 in a room with no audience to perform for. She sat down before he could see that her hands were not entirely steady. They ate, they talked, they argued about border patrol formations. She had an opinion, stated it clearly, held it under direct pressure from a man accustomed to having his positions accepted without contest. He pushed back. She found a better argument. He went quiet in the way that meant he was actually considering what she said, not waiting for her to finish so he could respond, genuinely turning it over. Then, "You may be right." She almost dropped her fork. "You look surprised," he said. "I am not accustomed," she said carefully, "to being told that by men who significantly outrank me." "Then you have been spending time with the wrong men." Neither of them looked away.
The evening stretched the way evenings stretch when no one is counting the bells and both people have quietly decided not to be the first to end it. He asked another question every time a natural pause arrived. He refilled her goblet with the casual deliberateness of a man not ready for the table to be empty. She felt it, and it frightened her far more than coldness would have. Coldness had a map. She had navigated coldness for years. This warmth, given without audience, without design, without any apparent strategy, she had no framework for. Her old framework was built for men who were loud with affection in the hall and silent when it mattered. This man was silent in the hall. Here, alone, in a room with one fire, he was present, entirely, unsettlingly, deliberately present. When she finally stood to leave, he walked her to the door himself, said nothing at the threshold, but he looked at her the way he had that first night, like something ordinary had done something extraordinary to him, and he had not yet found a category for it, and was not entirely sure he wanted to. The second invitation came 6 days later, not to the private dining chamber, to his rooms. She stood holding the parchment and felt every carefully constructed warning she had built into herself over 3 years arrive at once, orderly, insistent, fluent in the language of self-protection. She went anyway. She had braced herself for something to navigate. What she found instead, a fire, a low wooden chair pulled close to it, a second chair set beside it, not across from it, beside it, a low table, 2 cups, a worn map of the Northern Territories across his knees, him, already seated, looking up when she entered with the expression of a man who had genuinely not been certain she would come. "I was not sure you would," he said. "I was not sure either," she said. She sat in the second chair. They talked until the deep bells, the ones that marked the hours no one was supposed to still be awake. About his mother, who had been fiercer than anyone gave her credit for, and had taught him that silence was a weapon only fools wasted on noise. About her mother, gone 7 winters past, who believed stubbornness and loyalty were the same quality and had lived proving it. About what it meant to be lonely in a room full of people who needed something from you. He spoke about the pack not like a man performing power, like a man setting down a weight he had been carrying for a long time in a room where he did not feel he needed to keep holding it. At some point in the deep of night, the fire burned to embers, and the Alpha King fell asleep in the chair. Quietly, without ceremony, his hands loose in his lap, the map of the Northern Territories sliding to the floor. He looked younger, like someone who had not slept properly in a very long time, and had finally, in this room, with her in it, felt safe enough to. She sat in the other chair for a long time watching him, this man that every hall rearranged herself around,
who had walked past 3 women calling his name to reach her table, who had remembered the rosemary butter, who had set a second chair beside his and not across from it, who had spoken about loneliness like someone who had lived in it long enough to know its exact shape. She felt the thing she had been working very hard not to feel. Not love. Not yet. She was too careful for that. But the door to it was open. The door she had kept bolted for 3 years was standing open, and the draft coming through it was warm. She left before he woke, told herself it was consideration. She was very good at finding clean names for frightened things. What she did not know, he woke an hour later to an empty chair and a fire long dead. He sat in that absence for a long time. She did not know how long. She did not know that while she walked back to her chambers, a council member was already carrying a message to a woman in deep green, and that woman was already awake and already moving. She should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for weeks. Patient, quiet. The way a wolf is patient when it has already chosen its direction and simply has not yet arrived. The conversations that paused when Lena entered a room, the eyes that moved to her and away again too quickly. She had told herself it was imagination. She had been so focused on not falling that she forgot to watch where she was walking. The gathering was larger than usual, more formal. The air tasted like ambition and expensive candle wax. Petra found her near the back of the hall, by the tall windows, alone for the 30 seconds it took the crowd to shift and create a pocket of privacy that felt accidental and was precisely engineered. She was beautiful. Lena had always registered that abstractly, the kind of beauty that came with infrastructure, maintained by a woman who understood that appearance was currency and intended to remain solvent. She touched Lena's arm first, lightly, the touch of someone who needed to be read as kind. "May I steal you for just a moment? I have been where you are. I wish someone had told me." Her voice was warm. That was the first thing and the most dangerous thing. It came before the words and stayed after them and made everything feel like concern. Nearby, 3 women had stopped their own conversations, not obviously, the way you stop a conversation when you need to hear something but cannot appear to be listening. Their bodies had turned, just slightly, the jury positioning itself without announcing it had arrived. "I hope you will not take this the wrong way," Petra said, her hand still on Lena's arm, still warm, still gentle, performing care with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it. "He does this. You are not the first woman he has invited to his rooms. There have been others. There have always been others. Someone catches his interest and he is very present for a time. It feels like something. It is supposed to feel like something." A pause, small, perfectly timed. "You will be fine once it stops. They always are." Then quietly, as if reluctant, "He never continues past the 3rd week." A breath. "You are at the 3rd week." She squeezed Lena's arm once, warm, concerned, thorough. Then she walked away. The 3 women nearby resumed their conversation seamlessly, immediately, as if they had never stopped, the practiced sound of a trap closing. Lena stood by the window. Her face went very still. The specific stillness of someone who has just been cut and has not yet decided whether to look at the wound. She did not cry. Her throat tightened, the physical fact of it, the actual constriction, the way a body responds to a precise impact before the mind has processed where it landed. Her hands pressed down on the stone ledge, cold stone, grounding her. She did not look at the 3 women who had heard. She did not need to. She could feel their attention on the side of her face, not cruel, not kind, simply present. The audience a humiliation always requires to be complete. He does this. There have always been others. You are at the 3rd week. Not technically untrue, the surgical genius of them. They did not need to be a lie, they only needed to be enough. They were. She breathed in, once, smoothed the front of her dress with both hands, slow, deliberate, the way you smooth something when your hands need to be doing something your face cannot show. She did not look back at the room. She walked to the entrance, collected her cloak from the servant near the door without making eye contact, stepped outside into the cold night air, and felt the familiar fold begin, the tucking away of everything that had started to open. Not dramatic, not loud, the quiet, practiced muscle memory of a woman who knew exactly which way to bend so the breaking would not show. She did not go back. Not the following week when the gathering was larger and 3 people asked after her by name. Not the week after when a sealed parchment arrived at her chamber door and she stood looking at the handwriting for a long time before setting it aside unopened, then moving it across the room because looking at it was doing something to her chest she could not afford. She told herself she was protecting herself. She told herself it was the sensible thing. She was very good at the sensible thing, had built her entire life on the reasonable and the careful and the controlled, on not wanting things she could not keep. What she did not know, across the hold, a council meeting had ended badly, chairs pushed back hard, a silence of the kind that meant something had been said that could not be unsaid. Someone had told the Alpha King that the woman from the corner table had stopped coming to gatherings. What she did not know was the length of the silence that followed, or what it cost him to sit in it. He did not understand why she had gone. No one told him directly. They were all, he realized with cold precision, too fascinated to intervene. His counsel watched him with the careful neutrality of people holding very still near something that might move unpredictably. He sent a second parchment. Nothing came back. He found himself at a gathering 3 days later, arriving late, his eyes moving to a corner table before he had fully cleared the entrance arch. The table was empty. He stood in the middle of the hall for exactly long enough for 4 council members to notice. Then he left. He had never chased anyone in his life. He stood in a corridor that night and understood, with the uncomfortable precision of a man who does not enjoy being uncomfortable, that this was about to change. And beneath that, something else, something he had been carrying for 3 months and had told himself he would handle when it became necessary. It was becoming necessary. He stood there. He didn't speak. Then the door opened. He came alone, no guards, no prepared speech, no arrangement of words designed to land with appropriate authority and still leave him room to retreat. He was standing in her doorway in the dark of a late winter night with nothing. The silence after his knock was the longest in recent memory. He had spent 3 weeks measuring silences. This one was the longest. She opened the door and looked at him the way she always looked, assessing what she actually saw rather than what she was supposed to see, like she had never once given him the title without also looking for the man behind it. He said, "I know what Petra told you." Her hand on the door shifted, the grip of someone who had not expected that sentence. He told her what Petra had done, the engineering of it, the witnesses positioned, the warmth used as the delivery mechanism for a blade, the timing, the 3rd week chosen precisely, the ticking clock wound and placed where Lena would hear it at exactly the right moment. He told her, yes, there had been women before. He told her, no, it had not looked like this. And then,
Because he had spent his entire adult life letting presence carry what he could not bring himself to speak, letting 7 visits to a corner table say what he had no language for, he stopped. He released her hand, stood back slightly. The distance made him look not smaller, but more exposed, the way a person looks when they have removed something they usually carry. I have not sat at any person's table twice in 4 years. A breath. I have sat at yours 7 times. His jaw tightened. The crack, small, real, the first fracture in 10 years of controlled surface. I have never asked anyone to stand beside me, not once, in 10 years of this title. I do not know how to do this properly. I am likely doing it badly right now. A pause. I counted, he said quietly. 7. I need you to understand what that means. The wind moved through the corridor. He waited. She looked at him for a long time. This man who had sat at her table uninvited and reached for the bread she pushed across, who had sent 4 words on parchment unsigned, who had remembered the rosemary butter, who had set a second chair beside his own, who had fallen asleep in a room with her in it, and looked young and real and unguarded in a way she suspected no one else had seen in years. She thought about Petra's warmth, about the 3rd week, about the precision of a half-truth aimed at an existing wound. She thought about her old wound, the man who was loud in the hall and silent when it mattered. She thought about the corner table, the early exits, the dress she wore because she liked it. She thought about 7. He had counted. She looked at him standing in her doorway. No guards, no plan, no prepared language, just a man who had never chased anyone standing in the cold because the room was wrong without her in it. She stepped back from the door. He had to duck slightly for the doorframe. She had never noticed how small her entrance was until a man who occupied space like a weather system was standing inside it. He looked around her chamber, the coat hooks, the stack of borrowed manuscripts, the candle that had always leaned slightly left because she had never straightened it, with the careful attention of someone reading a language they had been trying to learn for a long time. She did not offer a tour. She walked to the hearth. She heard him pull out a chair. The small scrape against the stone floor, ordinary, domestic, was somehow the most significant sound she had heard in months. He sat at her table. Her small, slightly uneven, has-seen-better-decades wooden table she had carried from her mother's house. He sat at it like it was a throne room, like there was nowhere else in the world. She set the tea in front of him without asking how he took it. She already knew, had noticed without meaning to, the way she had noticed everything about him without meaning to. She sat across from him. The silence between them was the first in weeks that did not feel like absence. It felt like arrival. "I should have come sooner," he said. "Yes," she said, "you should have." No softening, no apology asked for the honesty of it. He nodded once, accepting it, which was itself new, and wrapped both hands around the cup, and something in his shoulders released that she did not think she was supposed to see. They talked the way they always talked, sideways into the important things, arriving at truth through some other door, finding each other in the margins of ordinary sentences. Outside, the winter night did what winter nights do. Inside, her small chamber held them both. Around the deep bells, he said something that made her laugh. Really laugh, the kind that surprised her, that came from somewhere she had not been reaching for in a very long time. She looked at him across her table and felt the last wall give way. Not dramatically, not with a sound, the way a knot releases when you stop pulling against it, quietly, with relief, the tension simply gone.
She did not reach across the table. He did, his hand open on the table between them, not grabbing, not demanding, just there, offered, patient in a way she had not known he knew how to be. She looked at it for a long moment, then she put her hand in his. They stayed like that while the night moved through its final hours, while the fire died to warmth, and the birds began outside, and the light came through her window in stages. First gray, then pale gold, then something warmer. He was still there. No woman keeps the Alpha King's attention. They had said it like a law of nature. He was still sitting at her table. It was morning. She had not asked him to stay. That was exactly why he did. She looked at him, this man every hall rearranged itself around, who had walked past 3 women calling his name without turning, who had sat at her table 7 times and counted, who had stood in a winter corridor with nothing prepared and cracked open just enough to say he did not know how to do this properly. And he looked at her like she was the only fixed point in a world that had always moved too fast. Nothing had been announced, nothing declared, no audience to perform for, no performance given. Just 2 people in a small chamber with a slightly uneven table, choosing each other in the quietest, most honest way available to them.
Then the knock came. Not gentle. The knock of someone delivering information that will not wait for a better time. Lena looked at Lester. Something moved across his face. He did not release her hand, but he did not meet her eyes. Lester. 3 seconds. The council, he said, has called a binding vote this morning before the second bell. She waited. 3 months ago, before the corner table, before any of this, they scheduled a formal mating, pack-approved, politically aligned, already agreed by the outer territories. He released her hand first. That was when she felt it. "Who?" she said. 1 word. "Petra." The silence rearranged things. "If you refuse the vote," Lena said slowly, "what happens? The council's authority is challenged. The pack fractures along loyalty lines. 2 outer territories have already signaled they would withdraw recognition." He stopped. "It would mean war," she said. "Instability, yes." "And Petra," she said, "she knew. When she came to me at the gathering, she already knew about the vote. Yes. She was not trying to protect me. No. She was making sure I left before I became a problem for her." Silence. Lena stood. She walked to the window. Outside, the pack's hold stretched in early morning light. The training grounds, the outer quarters, the forest at the border where she had once argued with him about trail routes, and neither of them had wanted to turn back. She turned from the window. He was watching her with the expression of a man who had made one decision and was waiting to find out what it cost him. His hands on the table, open, the same way he had offered them an hour ago. "I have never asked anyone to stand beside me," he said quietly, "not once, in 10 years of this title. I do not have the right language for it. I will likely do it badly." A breath. "But I am asking you." The knock came again, louder. Lena looked at him across her small, slightly uneven table, this man every room rearranged itself around, who had been outmaneuvered by a woman in deep green 3 months ago and walked to a corner table anyway, who had sat there 7 times and counted, who had knocked on her door with nothing prepared. She thought about Petra, about the vote, about a hall full of council members who had scheduled his future without her in it and called it governance. She thought about what it would mean to walk into that hall, no title, no rank, no strategy, just a woman from a corner table who had not been trying to be chosen, and somehow was. She crossed the room. She picked up his hand from the table. "Then let us go," she said, "before I think about it long enough to become sensible." The corner of his mouth moved, that real smile, the one not designed to be seen. He stood.
They walked to the door together. She opened it. The council messenger on the other side looked at Lena, then at the Alpha King, then at their joined hands. He went very still with the expression of a man who has just understood that this morning is going to be significantly more complicated than his instructions anticipated. "Tell the council," Lester said. "We are coming." We. The messenger left at speed. Lena looked at the corridor ahead, long, stone, torchlit, leading toward a hall full of people who had scheduled her replacement and called it governance. "I want you to know," she said as they walked, "that I am absolutely terrified." "Good, so am I." "That is not reassuring." "No, but it is honest." She almost laughed. "No woman keeps the Alpha King's attention," they had said. She was not keeping it. She was walking into a hall full of people who had scheduled his future without her in it, holding his hand. They had engineered a vote. She had pushed bread across a table. There is a difference between a strategy and a truth. The council was about to learn which one wins.